Welcome to the Connection Practice Podcast, where empathy, insight, and science come together to help you find peace within and harmony in your relationships. Join me for inspiring conversations and a practical skill that brings emotional safety, clarity, compassion, and connection to your life.
Welcome, everyone. Today we're joined by Dana Garnett. She's a mediator, conflict resolution strategist, and founder of the Mindful Strategy LLC. Dana merges CPA Big 8 accounting and an international career with the Coca-Cola Company with global life lessons from working and living 22 years among diverse cultures on 6 continents. This includes 7 years in Bangkok, Thailand, where she learned mindfulness from Eastern philosophical mentors. And with over 10 years of court-ordered mediation experience, Dana's developed a unique approach to resolving business and family conflict that achieves real resolution without having to have everyone around the table. She serves business owners in navigating conflicts that risk business success, from C-suite discord and succession challenges to customer disputes and generational rifts. She also serves business professionals such as CPAs, trustees, exit planning strategists, and wealth managers who are concerned about conflicts that risk their clients' business success and family wealth. Dana's path to this work began with personal experiences. First-hand litigation that resulted in health and financial loss led her to dedicate herself to preventing the pitfalls of unnecessary conflict. She holds a Master of Arts in Dispute Resolution and a Master of Science in Accountancy, along with a Bachelor of Music in Voice Performance. So Dana's a certified connection practice trainer and a certified heart math trainer. She serves on the board of Fulfilling the Vision, a nonprofit supporting Dallas artists who are successful around the world. So Dana brings a learner's mindset to integrating connection and mindfulness practices into everything she does at work, at home, and in service to her community. So welcome, Dana. You've traveled an unusual path from CPA and to the Coca-Cola Company internationally, and 22 years as an expatriate. So what was the turning point that led you from the corporate world to the world of mediation?
First off, thank you so much for having me as a guest. It is so lovely to be here with you and to reunite in many ways. And yes, what took me to this, put me on this path, the turning point was a very sad and traumatic divorce that I did not anticipate in my life. And that was about 12, 13 years ago now. And long story short, as it happens, when you go through something like that, you've never done it before. And you find yourself, I won't say a victim of a system, but because I don't think it's intended to be such, but you find yourself a participant in something that you have no idea what's coming at you, and you have no idea how to get through it, and no idea how to end it with just what happened with us was spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and health issues across the family. And it was just such a traumatic situation. When I came through all of that, I decided I wanted to do mediation better, because we had mediation in our as towards the end of the divorce, the legal side of it, right? And we'll talk about what real resolution is in a moment. But getting through that, I came out of it, and I was speaking to someone, telling my story the 20,000th time, and just saying, I wish I could help other people not suffer like this, because you just don't know what to expect when you're going through a divorce. And you've got children, and you're worried about all these aspects, your well-being, your children's well-being, your financial well-being. What does the future hold? So they just simply said, well, if you're looking to help people not suffer through this, consider becoming a mediator. And I'm like, well, why would I want to do that? I'm not a lawyer. I couldn't. And it turns out you don't have to be an attorney to be a mediator. So I decided, okay, I will explore this path. And 2, 3 years later, I had my master's degree and I was in this new place. And in fact, within 18 months of the divorce being final, because of things I had learned not only from my master's degree, but the connection practice and heart math. It's a piece of that connection practice and some other things in my life that I pulled together. And I was actually really recovered from my divorce. And that's when I began to realize, I can help other people not have to spend years upon years trying to recover from some kind of breakup, whether it's divorce or a
Mhm.
business breakup, because I began working with a family business advisor. He was directing me or directing clients to work with me. And I started helping in the business world to resolve things. So that's ultimately why it was a litigated divorce that was far too costly. Shouldn't have been, but I didn't know better. And so in the end, came through it. In fact, the father of my children and I get along really well. And pretty soon after, everything was moving forward and that 18 months onward. And our girls are so much better off because their parents can get along. So that's the personal story.
Wow. So having that very painful divorce sounds like it actually ended up rippling out into healing
Yeah.
within yourself, with your now ex-husband and the family. And so, there's an expression, the wounded healer. And is that right? Would you consider yourself, and as a wounded healer, what you're doing is helping businesses heal now. In other words,
Yes.
where there's conflict, there's a need for healing.
Yes.
And
Oh, yes.
yeah, does that all make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. Wounded, wounded, and healed healer.
Heal. Right, right, that the healer was healed as well.
Yes, right, right. Yes, yes. Had to figure out how to get healed
So you're not
and
in
then
a
pass it on.
perfectly wounded state,
Right.
but still you bring that experience of your own healing, which is so powerful. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering about how your many years in Thailand impacted this whole experience that you had of learning how to navigate through this painful conflict.
No, and that's a great question. The time we were there, I pretty soon after arriving, I had early retired myself from my corporate career and became an expatriate trailing spouse after having been an expatriate working for the Coca-Cola company for years. And was running a performing arts studio in Thailand. But I also was just wanting to understand more about the culture. And I heard about this opportunity to become a volunteer at the National Museum in Bangkok, where you study about art history, and so you can take people on tourists on tour through the museum. And it was a great way, I thought, to land and get acclimated. And when you learn about art history, you learn about religious history, and that's when I've really, for the first time, discovered Buddhism. And it was, and that mindfulness, this concept of mindfulness and what it was really all about. Little did I know I would be applying it down the road later in my life, because I was, at that time still married, managing the family, running my studio and living this expatriate life, and in a marriage that perhaps wasn't very happy, but you just keep going. You just make it work. And it wasn't until all that blew up and later on down the road I reflected back on my time in Thailand and now mindfulness began to really resonate with me more. I was able to tap into it more. And hence, I combined the concept of my corporate background and that mindfulness experience. And that's why I ended up calling my business and the work I do, the mindful strategy.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
So, during your time on our board, our nonprofit, the Razur Foundation International, you took the initiative to pilot a connection practice workshop for one of your business clients that was needing some help with conflict that was disrupting their operations.
Yeah, it was during a period when I had first started helping women facing divorce when I came out with my degree and the conflict resolution work I was doing. I was doing a number of divorce mediations. I still do court-ordered mediations today, not as many because I do much more conflict resolution coaching work. But at that time, I had been speaking to an audience of CPAs, and a gentleman walked up and literally said, because I was presenting myself as someone who helps people get through divorce, he said, I'm not a woman facing divorce. However, I have a company and we've got conflict and it's been going on for too long. And I wondered, could you help that? I said, certainly. So we got on a call and ended up hiring me to come do some workshops. And as I got to talking to him, of course, I knew I was a trainer with the connection practice and with heart math. And I decided I asked him, would you be open to a pilot workshop where I put together something? It's a modality, if you will, that's often used in education, and told him a bit about your work. And he said, sure. And so I ended up, and at the time we talked and I asked, may I have your permission to try this? And so it was taking the connection practice into a business setting, but in a much shorter amount of time. That was the challenge, because the first thing he said, this is what made me think about trying to do this in a little different way. He said, now I want you to come in and help, but I can't afford to pull everybody off the production line for long periods of time. And we don't work Saturdays, we don't do weekends, so it was like, we need help, but there were certain time constraints. And I appreciate that. There's a cost to the business, around this, but there was also a cost to the business not resolving the conflict. So I thought, okay, how about let's do a half-day workshop, and I did that and took everybody through, like in a group, a little differently. And long story short, we were able to tackle the problem, and I shouldn't say tackle, that's not very harmonious, but it wasn't tackling. We got down to the heart of the problem very quickly. And by about the third hour of this 4-hour workshop, they discovered it was an issue that had come up 8 years before. Nobody realized where it had, what that core was, the beginning. And when it all came out, and this is just simply walking them through the connection practice, right? And they're like, what? That's why you've been upset all this time? Yes, and the owner of the business is sitting in there just watching all this. And they were amazed, and that led to some further coaching of the team. I actually went back and did some more workshops with them to expand it to others, but we had to always time it so where people could all be in the same room at the same time because of production and things like that. But yeah, it was just, I had this sense that this can work in the business setting. And I know in your book, Completely Connected, you had already worked with businesses, but it was my first chance, or my first attempt at this, and it was successful. And I was very happy to have, in that process, contributed to what has now become Inner Wellness Program. And it's just, it's so rewarding to see that you can help people in that way.
It is. It's always awesome, isn't it, Dana? I never get tired of that feeling when you are able to help a conflict get resolved, So in your work with business owners since then, you've talked about leading with curiosity and also guessing feelings and needs. Can you tell me how you're using that in business?
Yes, absolutely. As humans, we're quick to judge. We're quick to make assumptions. And so it's really, we form these habits, and they are subconscious habits that we just kind of go to as our second nature. Go to is to be defensive or make a judgment. And in the business world, time is of the essence. And so, hey, have to have this now. And it's very, there's no time to talk things out, right? Well, as you know, when you apply, when you first start with, instead of making it about you first, if you first open up with, I'm wondering what's going on with this person, what are they feeling? What are they needing? Before launching in to what's important to you. And when you actually open up with that curiosity, you're going to get a response from that person. Like, hey, I'm wondering if you said this because you were feeling upset because we haven't made the progress on the project like you had hoped, and you're feeling under a lot of pressure to get this done. And you're going to get one of three responses: either yes, or no, that's not it at all, it's this, or well, kind of, sort of, both, And now you have new information to work with, and it gives you that opening. It helps to neutralize that situation, and that person now feels like, by asking. What I teach my clients is, when we offer you can call it empathy, or when we're curious about someone else ahead of our own needs, it's showing a subliminal, it's basically a subliminal sign of respect or appreciation for that other person, just because you asked.
Sure.
And the greatest thing is you don't have to be right. You don't have to guess right.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then I've had clients say, but what about me? Oh, no, this does not subjugate your feelings or needs either. I mean, at all. In fact, once you get to this stage, you can, once they have told you some response to your question, like, was that what's going on? Then you acknowledge it, make sure, thank you. That is so good to know. At the same time, I was feeling really confused or worried that I didn't have all the information that I needed, and perhaps didn't complete the report in such a way that is going to help us get this project done. And sometimes an apology may be necessary if it's appropriate to say, and I'm sorry if I didn't get that right. And maybe an apology isn't necessary. I'm just sorry it took me so long, or I just didn't understand what to do. How can we go forward? And then put it out there again, reapplying curiosity. How can we go forward? Or what do you see as a way forward in working on this to get this done and out the door? So curiosity sets you up to learn more than you may have realized to start. It shows us a subliminal sign of respect. You still get to have your part, your say, you get to be heard. And ultimately, leading with curiosity is self-preservation, because when we lead with ourselves first, people get on the defensive and everyone's cortisol goes up. When you lead with curiosity in the form of empathy, or however how you describe it, it's the path of least resistance. And you may have an underlying need for patience to try that initially, but you'll find time and time again that's the easier path through very difficult situations without unnecessary conflict happening, or escalating. Does that help answer that question?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Dana. It sounds like, you're describing what we do teach in the connection practice, which is empathy first. And of course, empathy is curiosity, it's guessing.
Right.
Empathy first,
Right.
honesty second. And also, there was an element that you mentioned in there, which is about owning your part. In other
Yeah.
words, if there is a need for apology, really owning what is
Right.
your part, but then also speaking your honesty by talking about how you feel and what you need. So
Yes.
all those elements land for me, and we incorporate them into the connection practice. We don't speak it as so much as curiosity, but I like that. I like using the
Mm.
word curiosity. We just say empathy first, honesty second. But
Yeah.
really, if you keep that curious attitude in your empathy, that's what makes it land, right? And then once
Yeah.
you get the empathy to land and you've established a connection, then it's so much easier to be heard. Because as
Yes.
you said, it's path of least resistance to do it that way. If you go with your honesty first, you're gonna not have a good connection, and it's very unlikely you'll be heard anyway. So you might as well
Exactly.
have the patience and wait,
That's
right?
right. Yes. Yes. And
Right.
you were asking the question around the business world. What I found was when we use the word empathy, it's kind of like with the word mediation. I don't always tell people I'm a mediator because they go, "Oh, you're a mediator?" Because if they had experience with that and wasn't good, they kind of discount you.
Mhm.
It's like, oh,
Really?
I don't want that kind of help, right? But the same thing with empathy in the business world. If I say empathy, uh, because in today's world it's becoming more and more, post pandemic, right? Mental well-being and health and awareness around that is becoming more and more public knowledge. Some people think they know what empathy means, which, so they judge it. And if I
Uh,
said, just use empathy,
uh-huh.
or lead with empathy, well, that doesn't work for me because they haven't really experienced that. So curiosity is something that it's like kind of this overall umbrella. If you are curious around somebody, around what's going on with them, that's kind of how I started using that word
Mhm.
curiosity. But ultimately, yeah, I mean, how can you be curious effectively? Well, tapping into feelings and needs, which is empathy. But yeah, it's all in the message, to be honest. So that has been I just thought it'd be worth mentioning. That's how I kind of came up with approaching it as curiosity.
Yeah, well, it makes sense to me. You have to use language that reduces fear,
Yeah. Yes.
reduces judgment. And so by using the word curiosity, then it's opened doors for you that might not otherwise have opened. Is that right?
Right. And yes, and be able to
Mhm.
serve more people as a
Right,
result,
exactly.
And you also
Mhm,
said about apologies or owning it. So true. I think that speaks to our need as humans, to have a genuine apology is expressing your need for or meeting your need for integrity,
uh-huh,
and just
absolutely.
and it's or and anyway, I just thought that's something else you mentioned. I thought, yeah, that's so important to be able to own that because you probably have a value around integrity, and that carries a long way with people too.
Mhm. So, with all that we've talked about here, it sounds like that this kind of awareness that you've gained led you into developing a strategy in your company and mindful strategy that is, you've told me it's heart, clear, neutralize, and strengthen. Do
Yes.
you want to add anything about that?
Yeah, it's the four-step method or process, if you will. Mindful strategy is effectively getting to the heart of whatever that issue is quickly. And then clear is clearing the deepest issues or triggers, no matter how long they've been there, which starts to neutralize a situation so that you can therefore strengthen.
Hmm.
Sorry, the neutralized piece is when you neutralize it because everyone feels heard. And
Mm-hmm.
then from there, you can strengthen rather than sever relationships. So heart, clear,
Hmm.
neutralize, strengthen. And the heart is understanding how do you name that trigger to start? And getting it down to a very specific example, not a
Hmm.
generality, because we tend to spin in storytelling. It keeps us going, right? Being able to name that trigger to start, that's the pattern interrupt. So you're getting to the heart of it. Now that you've identified the heart of it, how do you clear it? This is where I bring in parts of the connection practice to
Hmm.
actually tap in for that person, for themselves. And if there's somebody else involved in the situation, guessing around the other person. And the neutralization piece is now you have to have a conversation. Now, what the connection practice teaches us is, okay, I've gotten this far. Now what? What do I do with this insight I have? And it's having, a lot of what I do is helping people construct a conversation that is likely different than the ones they've had before. And I coach them, and from having processed through something, all the vocabulary is right there. I often say being able to communicate effectively is simply that's very specific word choice in a very specific order at a very specific moment. And if
Hmm.
you understand how to find those words, and that comes from the feelings and the needs, right? So when you now show up in a situation differently with this different type of approach to a conversation, things shift. And now
Hmm.
now you're beginning to strengthen that relationship rather than, it's all lost. What I discovered as a mediator for years, you get to settlement, which you hope to at least because the legal battle is over. But the challenge is settlement is not real resolution because there's still some resentment. There's still some anger maybe left over because you didn't quite get what you wanted, but and it's only on paper, right? It's a legal end on paper, but that mediated settlement agreement does not clear things for you. So what happens? We take those resentments, that anger into the next business partnership or the next marriage. And we wonder why the same thing happens to us again. Because we never really got to the heart of things. We didn't clear things. It never
Hmm.
neutralized. And we ended up severing situations. So the whole point to real resolution is being
Hmm.
able to get something really cleared for yourself and with someone else such that it doesn't, memories of that may come up. Someone may say something that reminds you of something, but you're no longer triggered. You're really
Hmm.
over it. And the other beautiful thing is that you don't have to have everybody around the table to do this. Most of the people I work with are individuals who come to me saying, no one wants to talk about this, or no one sees this but me. If we don't fix this, we're going to lose our best customer or our best supplier, or we're going to go bankrupt. And I coach people on helping them to show up differently in the situation. And it's rare that the other people they're dealing with, their business partner or whomever, ever knew they went and got help.
Mhm.
But they have transformed and now they're showing up differently, and it starts to shift those dynamics. So
Yeah,
it's so that's how I ended up going from witnessing mediation after mediation after mediation and people leaving that space. And I know how I could help them, but that's not my role in the mediation. That's not what I'm supposed to be doing there. But I can take people to that further step of real resolution, if that helps.
yeah, I hear
Yeah.
you, Dana. And what I hear you saying is that when you are able to get that, well, the way that you've languaged it, using what we call empathy and insight, but in more specific steps that you've evolved, getting them to that point individually. Once they've shifted, then the dynamic with other people in their lives changes as well,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
what you're just aiming for is for them to have a real resolution. But still, we know there's always a ripple effect when we let go of our own anger
Yeah.
and frustration and so on. When we are able to get to that real resolution, that peace in our
Yes.
hearts, clarity in our minds,
Yeah.
then it makes a difference in us and all those around us. So, so
Absolutely.
yay, yeah, you've done a beautiful job getting people to a place where they can move on to, get out of conflicts where people can be
Yeah.
stuck for so many years, especially when there's deep hurt and so on, that you've been able to work with people to resolve that and be able to move forward in their lives.
Hmm. Yeah.
Exactly. Hmm. All
It's
right.
very rewarding. Yeah.
And you've expanded, I know, from serving family businesses to conflict in non-related things like that, right? With,
Mhm.
you said, trustees and exit planning strategists and wealth managers.
Yeah.
So what patterns have you noticed across all of these different contexts
Mm.
about what people really need when they're stuck in conflict?
Yeah, that what I started to see and when I was originally working with family business owners, and I now have a few years ago I launched a program called Resolving Family Business Conflict. It's now called Resolving Family and Business Conflict because I had so many family business owners asking me, I've got someone who runs a business. They're not related to their business partner, but could you help them too? And I said, sure, I don't have to only serve family businesses. And then I had someone say, I've got a client. In this case, it was a trustee who said, I've got a family that I'm an independent trustee and I'm overseeing, the distribution of assets and things in accordance with the trustee rules, the rules of the trust. But this family is in bitter conflict. Can you come work with them? Because I'm afraid of a lawsuit coming up. And,
Mm,
it's going to cost dearly and it's going to eat away at the assets. The challenge with that is I said to this trustee, I would love to be able to help. The challenge is if you brought me in, unless they're asking for help, they may not see them as a problem, or they may think you think they're a problem, and they're not going to be open to wanting to help. And this is what I've seen, Rita Marie, so much over the years. People really, if they're open to changing, or they've gotten to that point. What's that expression? The pain of change is no, sorry. The pain of things staying the same way is greater than the pain of change. When they get to a point where they really want things to be different, they'll be open to trying something different. But when people are just embittered and they're fighting and, just to go in and say, okay, we're going to make this better, they're going to look at you and say, what? Why are you coming here? So what I started doing, I said to that trustee, I can help you as the trustee. I can help you, teach you how to show up differently in the conversations with
mm,
these family members
mm,
and shift the dynamics yourself. In fact, I gave a talk last year. It was a national conference for the Independent Trustee Alliance. And it was the transformative trustee, how it takes only one person to save family wealth. And so that has led to, I was working with a cohort of trustees and now exit planning strategists. You're asking what's that common thread? Exit planning strategists who are trying to get their clients down a path to sell their business, but they're resisting the change to the operations that are needed to make it more profitable to have that sale. Or they get down to the sale and the buyer says something that upsets them, and now and everything's thrown off the rails. And now, after all this money spent a year or so trying to sell the business, it all blows up because now they're in conflict. And attorneys worried about their even attorneys worried about their clients. Most often, these are attorneys who have become trustees, but wealth managers, wealth advisors, financial advisors who see conflict in a family, and they're not heeding that financial advisor's advice because the conflict is so rife. So I work with these business professionals to be the catalyst themselves and teach them. What is it? Teaching, instead of here's the fish, I'm going to teach you how to fish, and giving them these skills that they can use to help transform situations. And I have had beautiful messages from my clients. I have clients that are trustees for special needs trusts, where there's been some tragic accident and there's a trust set up to care for someone for the rest of their life. It's so emotional. And the trustee is trying to keep the rules of the trust being followed by the family, but the family is so gripped with emotion around the tragedy that they don't understand why they have to follow this certain rule. And the trustee is just making sure that the funding is not cut off because the rules aren't being followed. So how do you have those kind of conversations? And when they have shown up differently in the conversation and come back to me and said, wow, they so appreciated what I said. And now it even gave us a new way to look at this. And now I can fund it this way, which is within the rules of the trust, and help. And they're more willing now to, have people come in to take care and do what's needed. So just impacting people's lives that way it's also very rewarding. I'm not only just helping that person I'm serving, but that knock-on effect of bringing peace and harmony, in very difficult situations.
Well, that makes so much sense, Dana. And essentially what you're doing by teaching that person is then you get a greater ripple effect, right?
Yeah.
In other words, it's not just you doing it with people, but you're training others to create a bigger ripple effect, which ultimately ripples out to all of us for
Yes,
being a peaceful world, right? Which
that's
brings me
right.
to my next question. With all the experiences that you've had, living in different places around the world and then working with families, I'm wondering how this cross-cultural life that you've had has shaped your perspective about the universality of our needs, the way that we are as human beings in comparison to how culture shapes us. How do those to interact, the universality and at the same time our own cultures.
I love that universality versus and culture. Yes. It's been really interesting. What I have come to learn that regardless of how we're raised, because we're all raised even within a culture, how a family operates is going to be different from how another family operates, perhaps, as to how they handle conflict. But across cultures, what I've seen over the years is at the end of the day, we are all human. And we all are wired the same way. And that universal need for respect, appreciation, for safety and security, for purpose, these are all something within any culture. And in fact, and I love you brought that up about the universality, is that, we have in the business world, there are a lot of personality tests, which have their purpose. That in organizational consulting, you might do the DISC system or Myers-Briggs or Enneagram. And they all have, it's interesting information. But what I have learned, and I've participated in these over the years in the corporate world, but that's a lot of information you can find out about yourself and maybe about your team members. But okay, you're a high D and I'm an I, or you're an ENFT and I'm an EMPJ, whatever those. I'm a 7, you're a 2. It's interesting, but when people are in conflict, and humans are in conflict, our bandwidth tends to be shot. And so to try to remember how I'm supposed to show up talking to you and how I'm supposed to respond to you and all those definitions, right? So what I tend to say is, personality tests have nothing to do with conflict resolution. It's interesting information, but at the end of the day, it's getting to the heart. Again, what's that specific example, whether it was yesterday or 20 years ago, that set you off or somebody else off. And, what do you do to clear it? And now you start to neutralize and strengthen the relationships. That going back to that, it's like it can cut through political, religious, cultural, social, gender, generational differences. And it's amazing. It's usually my program is my full program is 2 months to 8 weeks. Because there's a study out there says it takes about 2 months to really start to turn around a habit and start to have a new habit become second nature. I've just recently condensed my program down to a 3-week version of that for people that want to jumpstart a new habit. It's the same material compressed in 3 weeks, more as a professional development training program. But either way, at the end of the day, it's about developing a new habit, a new approach. And again, across cultures, it works because I have had clients who are from Asia, from the Arab world, from Europe,
Mhm.
in this country, from state to state, you can have different regional cultures. So this work, what's beautiful about it is you don't have to suffer so long in conflict. You can get to the heart of things quickly and resolve them faster than you would think and with lasting change. That's the thing. So you don't end up, everything unravels and you're back at square one again.
Yeah,
And in the business world, this is what was so attractive. Sorry to finish this off. Time is of the essence again. And in the business world, they were just like, I haven't got time. I need to get this resolved, and you can. You can. And if you get to that point where you really need it done, you'll be open to the process and you'll get the progress and the results.
yeah.
So,
I resonate with all of that, especially your emphasis on the universality is what essentially makes it efficient,
yeah. Yes.
right? Universality makes it efficient because then
Hmm.
you're cutting through all of these things that can really create differences rather than connection.
Yeah.
And so when you're
Right.
able to
Yeah.
cut through all that, then you can be super efficient and that works
Yeah.
in business.
Yes, exactly. And what you just said something reminded me as well. These not to diss, as my daughters would say, diss a personality test because it has
Mhm,
value in certain circumstances. But what's happening is whether it's a personality test or something that we're calling someone else. When we put labels on people,
mhm,
you're this, you're hard to get along with. Or
mhm.
if or you're a D, people may, I don't want to be called a high D or what, it's like when you put a label on somebody, it's not comfortable. Just the same with ourselves. So it's taking away labels. And when we talk about politics, religion, culture, all these, we put labels on people and it erodes that universal humanness we have, that we're all connected on this same neurological wired level. So that's, just to add to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because, essentially those are judgments
Yes.
and
Yes.
they just make it very difficult to get connected.
Right.
And so you've found a way to get through all of that. And
Yeah.
and especially in business, you know,
Yeah.
when we have all those different labels, it's so inefficient.
Mhm.
You know, it makes things so unnecessarily complicated. And these other methods that you mentioned, like Myers-Briggs and so on,
Right.
Enneagram, they're, like you said, great information, but
Mhm.
not practical in the moment.
Right.
You know, uh, you know, uh, since you're a connection practice trainer, you've heard us call the connection practice the profound made practical. And that's what I
Mhm.
hear that you've done in business with all of this, is
Yeah.
that you've been able to use universality and the universal needs to make things really practical and efficient in business,
Yeah.
and actually usable when you need them.
Yeah.
You're
Right.
not caught up in your head in theory and labels and all kinds of things that really get in the way rather than help
Right.
you resolve conflict.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So,
All right. So
yeah.
another question. So what shift happens for business owners when they see that this kind of learning is
Mm.
really a way to create a de-risk strategy, right? So that you can prevent problems rather than having to deal with them on the other side when they
Yeah.
become
Yeah.
terrible conflict.
Yeah. That de-risking, that's something that is often talked about in the exit planning strategy world, where you're trying to de-risk a process to get yourself ready for sale, or you can de-risk in the financial wealth world, right, or wealth management world. Like, how do we lower risks? The catch is, to your question, what motivates, like, what is that shift? What motivates, particularly in business, but just humans in general, to make that shift, or motivates them to even take that leap of faith initially to learn something new so they can make that shift and de-risk and prevent unnecessary things from blowing up. And that goes back to, I said something earlier, that putting yourself in someone else's shoes, or curiosity, is self-preservation, because when conflict is present, we're stressed. And when we're stressed, it's basically a state of dis-ease, right? The opposite of ease. Left too long, whether it's churning under the radar or it's blowing up every day, dis-ease becomes disease. And that's because the cortisol level is up, and we haven't been able to balance that out, and our immune system is taking a hit. When we are emotionally stressed, we're mentally stressed. Like, we can't work through something emotionally, or is still pounding at us, or even burning up over the radar. It's fine until I'm reminded about something, and now I get worked up again. What happens is, when we are emotionally stressed, we start getting mentally stressed. You know that expression, I'm so stressed I can't think straight.
Mhm.
And eventually our neck starts to hurt, or we start to have digestive issues. We can't sleep well. Now our physical domain, if you will, is under stress. Now, in dealing with other people, because we are emotionally, mentally, and physically in distress, our tolerance of other people's beliefs and values, it's like not a chance, because I'm in pain. Until I feel better, I'm not even going to care about you. And so we have this cycle. But the motivator is, when we think about that state of heightened stress, our body is breaking down sooner than it needs to. We're all aging from the day we're born. But why hurry the aging? When we are in the state of dis-ease, you're just churning up the cortisol and breaking down your immune system and all your physical systems, such that you can literally become sick from never having cleared what could have been something that could have been cleared. I saw this when I was coming out of my divorce. I spoke to probably 20 women ahead of me that were giving me very, very valuable advice. I mean, they were well-intended advice, but they'd tell their story. And every story ended, pardon my French, but, he's still a bastard, or the kids are still, having a hard time. And I'd say, well, when did this happen? It was, 15, 20, 30 years ago. And they're still telling the same story. And every time we tell that story, we're churning up the cortisol. Our bodies doesn't know the difference between when it originally happened or when you retell it. And so that's affecting our longevity. So literally clearing issues, you can live longer and happier and healthier if you can just get these conflicts cleared. And then learning how to, once you get something cleared, if you've had, like when people come to work with me, if they've had some big issue, it's not just clearing that and moving on. It's building the skill set. So now when the next thing comes up, and it will, right? Because we're humans. It's not about avoiding conflict. It's about avoiding unnecessary escalation. Now you've got the tools to dance with conflict. And so no matter what, I always had that as motto for years. Happiness is not getting to a place where there's no problem, where everything's okay, because that's never the case. Happiness is that knowing that whatever life throws you, you can handle it. Even in the greatest crises and the greatest challenges, there is a way to navigate through with greater ease, so that you don't have to succumb and your body doesn't have to break down. You don't have to age faster. So I put all that evidence science-based stuff up front when I'm working with business owners and in the business world. And that, right there, it's like, okay, it's like that's the motivator usually. It was for me when I began to realize, what am I doing to myself? And so now you're more open to be curious about someone ahead of yourself, about not ahead of yourself, but in a conversation,
Mhm.
asking first before you launch in about your needs, because you're just keeping the cortisol down. It's a life preserver.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
it sounds like you've really incorporated all of this into your own life. You're teaching it to others. And it seems to me like since I've known you so many years now, Dana, that you have a deeper confidence than ever. And that's what I hear is the outcome of what you're teaching.
Thank you.
That you teach people to have a go-to to a preventative strategy in life for, preventing conflicts or resolving them quickly. And that gives them that deep confidence. And so I see you embodying that and
Yeah.
spreading that ability, which is so important because when we have deep confidence, then we stop doing things out of insecurity and reaction,
Right.
right?
Right.
Which
Yeah.
brings me to another question about civility. You mentioned to me that you've been referencing this quarterly civility index that's issued by SHRM. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about SHRM and your thinking about this civility index.
Yes, absolutely. SHRM is the Society for Human Resource Management, huge association. And
Mhm.
I was speaking to a colleague of mine, and I were collaborating on a talk to. It was a global conference last May in Chicago for the Risk Management Society and Risk and Insurance Management Society and RIMS, and we spoke on the neuroscience of conflict and strategic risk management. And in putting that talk together, I was doing some looking online for some data. And starting in uh, 2024, the first quarter of 2024, SHRM started tracking civility in the workplace, and incivility has been increasing, not surprisingly, perhaps, every quarter. And it's costing businesses in the United States a collective $2.1 billion in lost revenues from incivility in the workplace. And 6 out of 10 employees feel like, their workplace is too toxic. And so I picked up on this, and I love that they're talking about this because it shows that, particularly post-pandemic as well, that, we're talking more publicly now about incivility or the need to calm things down. And they point out the big contributors to incivility are the differences in culture, race, religion, all these things we've talked about. But going back to what we've also discussed today is, those are the contributors, but there is a way to get right to the heart of any of those things. And so when you talk about training and development, professional training and development in the business world, this is something that, there's such an opportunity to curb incivility, to reduce incivility. So yeah, I'm referring to that in a lot of my talks right now because I think it's fantastic that SHRM is talking about it and putting it out there. And that's the cost. I said earlier, what's the shift that business leaders go through to show up differently? It's also the cost of the bottom line, and not just your health, but we're talking, the wealth of your business, and also with families. Again, we're getting back to trust or situations where people are fighting over money. Sometimes if you're so wealthy, the fight to be right, maybe the shift for them is the health piece, right? But if you're not that wealthy and you're fighting, that learning a different way to show up in conversations is going to save you money.
Mhm.
It's going to save you money
You
because it's
call
going
it
to take.
the ultimate ROI, right? Isn't that what you
Yes.
the
Yes,
ultimate
thank you.
ROI?
Thank you.
Right.
It is the
Yeah.
ultimate investing in training that's going to help reduce incivility is the ultimate return on your investment. Yes, thank you. The ultimate ROI for businesses dealing with that. So,
You think, Dana, that sometimes businesses misunderstand when we talk about like social emotional intelligence and the part it plays or what part connection plays in the workplace? Do they see this as something that's really not important in business, or is there a growing awareness in business that this does matter?
yes, in fact, there's some I was we're both familiar with heart math because heart math's accessing insight through heart math is something that's uh, uh, brought into the connection practice so beautifully. I was attending a conference and listening to a team from Heart Math in the Netherlands. talk about how they had done this work with, and they're still doing this work with the Dutch National Police Force, which I know you're familiar with, and teaching them what is called coherence. That every Dutch officer that goes through training learns this, and so they, it was amazing. Everyone's just really amazed. This was back in 2015. They started this, and I was there in 2016 when they presented it. And I asked, on a break, I asked this colleague of mine, how did you get a police force, the National Police Force, to I don't want to say buy into this, but to be open to this work, being soft skills, these
Right.
social emotional intelligence are soft skills. And he was an engineer in the corporate world who left the corporate world because of all the stress that was affecting his health, discovered, heart math, and ended up working with heart math a lot. But it was interesting. He said to me, as direct as an engineer can say, there's nothing soft about it. It's a technical or even a life skill that's backed in science. There's nothing soft about it. He repeated that. And I said, okay. I said, can I use that? He said, by all means. But this is it. People think that social emotional intelligence skills are soft skills because we're comparing them to technical accounting skills or technical legal skills, or technical engineering processes, or technology. And really, these are life skills backed in science, and it really isn't anything soft about it in the context that it's not something that it's intended with intention to resolve something so that you can get on with life more easily. That having social emotional intelligence skills. I wish, something I talk about all the time, I wish we had this in schools. I wish we learned this in schools. I know this is where you started. You so wanted to be able to help children in school dealing with issues, right? And I wish we learned this before we got married, or if anyone gets married, or form a business, form a trust. If we only had these skills, right? There'd be a lot less loss of health, wealth, and relationships in the world.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah.
And when you talk about people having that perception that these are soft skills, one of the things that we know from the science is that when we are able to move into coherence, like what heart math teaches, when we're in a state where our heads are spinning and we're trying to analyze it, we're trying to figure this out, and I'm going to think it, and I'm going to think it, and I'm going to think it, and probably overthink it, right? Right? And then, so we're going in this spin, and we know from the science that when we get our heads and hearts in alignment, that we can access our best thinking. So it's not soft in the sense that it takes you away from good thinking, just the opposite. It takes you out of this kind of craziness and puts you into this state where you can think with all of your resources. You can access your best intelligence when you're in this state, and there's nothing soft about that.
No, and that's excellent that you talk about that, because in the business world, there is so much critical decision making being made under pressure. Being able to, in a heartbeat, be in a place where you can access your higher intelligence and be able to have much more clearer thinking capacity, so that you're making critical decisions without regret. Because you talked about confidence earlier, which was thank you so much for saying that, because it's instilling in ourselves that we have the ability for this pattern interrupt, and being able to align ourselves like that in an instant. It helps us to make those whatever decisions we're having to make with greater confidence.
Absolutely.
So anyway, love
Well,
that.
listen, you've shared with me that you're helping your mother right now.
Yes.
Her memoirs. And of course, you're a mother and you are working in business. And so I'm wondering how you are embodying connection in all these arenas in your life. Can you share a little bit about what it's all come to in your life, Dana, how that's working out in the wholeness of your life?
Absolutely. My mom is writing her memoirs. I've been helping her with this for about 4 years now. We're getting very close to finishing her book. And What's interesting is, as a mediator, we have this expression, don't mediate your family, because no matter how good you may be at negotiating, or how good you may be able to be at stepping out objectively in a situation, even with relatives, they're not trained in that way, and therefore they can't see you as objective. And so it's just not a good idea to mediate your family. That said, in helping my mom write her book, when one is putting out their memoirs, they're talking about things in their life that were maybe difficult, right? And helping them to work through that. And we have fun no matter what with the book, but there have been times where things are coming up, and supporting her in what to say, or how to say something, because she wanted this book to be a legacy for her grandchildren primarily. That's where it started. And to, like, her life lessons she's learned that she would love to make sure they know. But in doing that, as she would say, you can't, it can't just be this very simple, plain vanilla book, right? It's like where everything's perfect. You have to tell some things. And even one of her grandkids said, Grandmom, you got to spill the tea. If you want us to know about life, you got to tell us what went what went down, what happened at different times in your life, And so sometimes, we grapple with how much, it's very vulnerable to do that. I've used the connection practice and all this work that I'm doing, and it has helped her tremendously since my father's passing to deal with her grief over the years. And when she is refocusing, not reliving, but telling for her book a certain story, stuff can come up. And it's a beautiful time where, we have become even more connected working on this project together, because, I know to pause, even though, don't mediate your family or don't coach your family, but I'm very careful not to do that. I just sit and give her space when she needs it. And I guess I ask, is this a good time to pause this? We celebrate when we've gotten another chapter done, and then applying this to my own life, the balancing of that with my business and growing that, and my own life. I tell my clients every day, I eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff. And that's how I'm able to keep going every day, because, whatever I'm teaching them, I do live this for myself, and I'm human too. I have times, like, gosh, the last quarter of last year, I was doing a lot of different things in my business, and things were happening in the family. I felt very discombobulated, and I was doing a lot of processing for myself, and I was needing those insights for myself, and what does this all mean, and what's my best next decision? And I was feeling a little overwhelmed, well, a lot overwhelmed in many ways. And having these skills doesn't mean, again, that life's just going to become easy. It's just that knowing these skills, you can manage things, you can manage through things more easily, and you can be more assured that whatever decisions you're making, you're doing the best you can. Maybe to finish up, there's a beautiful Maya Angelou quote: everyone does the best they can with what they know at the time. If we knew better, we'd do better. And with my clients, a lot of the times, they'll start to shift for themselves, but the other people that they're dealing with don't have the benefit of this education. And we need to remember that everybody's doing the best they can with what they know, and not to judge. If someone is blowing up at you about something, that's probably the best they can do in that moment, and whatever you respond is your choice, and having these skills will help you respond in those situations more effectively. So life happens, and personal, business, everything combined. It's still a journey. It's still a journey, just trying to get through a little more easily every day.
I
So
hear that, Dana. It sounds to me like for you, every day is just walking your talk. You're learning it yourself, you're teaching it to others, you're continually immersed in this aim of walking your talk with integrity. Is that right?
that's my intention. Yes. Yes, Rita Marie. That's what it's all about.
And at the
Yeah.
same time, we're all doing the best we can. The founder of nonviolent communication, Marshall Rosenberg, would frame that as you just have to see that all human beings are just trying to get their needs met,
Yeah.
which means
Yeah.
they're doing the best that they can to
Right.
get their needs met.
Right.
And so, yes, we're all
Yeah.
doing the best that we can to get our needs met. And I
Yeah.
see you have really gotten so intentional about
Mm.
immersing yourself in a way that continually challenges your own growth and really ripples out in helping so many people to find
Mm.
greater peace, Dan. I'm so grateful
Mm.
for having had the chance to get to know you years ago and to see you grow and thrive and build your business on these approaches to life, on seeing life in this way and helping people to live more peacefully. So
Oh,
thank you so much for being my podcast guest today. It's been a great pleasure. Uh, and and I'm gonna see you soon in Dallas, am I not?
yes, we have a
Yeah,
reunion coming up. I'm so
yeah,
excited. I
yeah, we get
know.
to see each
Oh
other
my
in person
gosh,
at the airport. So
it'll
thank
be
you
great.
again, my
And
friend. Yeah.
thank you, Rita Marie. I just want to thank you again for inviting me and all the things you have offered and said. And you have been an inspiration for me for so many years, so many years. And if it were not for the connection practice and what you created there, it truly has been one of the key pillars of my own shift in my own life and that initial recovery that has led me to be able to help others. And I'm grateful to you for that. Eternally
Well,
grateful. Yeah.
it's mutual. So thank you, my friend, and I'll see you in Dallas soon.
Yeah. All right. All right.
See you then.
Bye.
Okay. Bye bye.